system. The Western Region government, led by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, introduced telecasting to Nigeria with the establishment of Western Nigerian Television in Ibadan on October 31, 1959. Digital journalism followed much later in the 1990s. The place and purpose of journalism in society. Like communication itself, journalism and the press are indispensable to society. Emeritus Professor Olatunji Dare, my former teacher, a first-rate Nigerian academic, intellectual, and scholar, a renowned journalist and journalism teacher, has disproved the legendary Aristotle, who submitted that man is a political animal. A theory the whole world hitherto took hook, line, and sinker. He has empirically established instead that rather than being a political animal, man is first and foremost a communicating animal. That is, communication is the most important, pervasive, and fundamental of all human activities. As rightly put said, communication is the fundamental social process, and man in society is not basically a political animal as Aristotle held, but a communicating animal. For even politics itself is rooted in communication. The roles which journalism and the press perform in the modern society are numerous. It is the traditional functions of the press to inform, educate, and entertain society and to help sell goods and services. Beyond these traditional or customary duties, journalism and the press help to transmit and advance culture, mirror and reflect society, and serve as a forum for the free expression of opinions and ideas. They also serve as a bearer of danger signals, a crusader for social justice, a mass mobilizer, the pillar of public opinion, and a most indispensable instrument of governance. From the numerous indispensable functions which journalism and the press perform in society, it is very clear that they are a concomitant, a sine qua non of the modern world. There is between the modern press and the public an implicit contract, a promise that the former will furnish the latter with all the information required to live and function as normal and responsible members of society. As Rajab has observed, any modern society today is hardly imaginable without a specialized subsystem which disseminates information internally within that society and externally between societies in the world as a whole. The power of journalism. It is often said that the press is powerful. Journalism and the press are often taken or assumed to be very powerful everywhere. Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, perhaps the greatest military ruler of all times, aptly captured the power of the press in his classical statement, "4 hostile newspapers are more to be feared than 1,000 bayonets." By powerfulness, of course, is meant the ability and capacity to influence people's thoughts, beliefs, and consequently actions. A news or mass communication medium conveying messages or information to thousands and millions of homes wields a great deal of influence and power. Notwithstanding that communication effect has long left the hypodermic needle theory level, whatever good, bad, proper or improper message the press conveys has the potential to influence its audience one way or the other. Journalism education and training. If we compare journalism with other professions, we will discover that journalism was relatively late in coming. We talked about 1605 when the first newspaper emerged. Even when they did, there were no journalism or mass communication schools. Wherever journalism has first made its debut, wherever it first appears, anywhere in the world, we won't have trained journalists. The implication of this was that all early journalism practitioners learned and practiced journalism on the job. So good language, diction, and essay writing ability were passports to journalism practice. In fact, some of the early journalists recruited in this manner performed so wonderfully that the thought became rife in some parts of the world that the practice of journalism required no formal training. But of course, Joseph Pulitzer has disproved that. According to Pulitzer, the only position a man is capable of filling by the simple fact of his birth is that of an idiot. The only position a man can successfully fill by the simple fact of birth is that of an idiot. To be proficient in any profession, you require training. Early proprietors of newspapers found out this very costly. And one of them was the late Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, the first Nigerian to set up a chain of newspapers. If we read his Odyssey, where he gave an account of how these papers died one after the other, he laid it on the lack of the knowledge of press law by journalists he recruited at that time. And what happened? They were just publishing and amassing libel suits for the organization, and the organization was paying heavily until it could no longer afford further payment. So this is the situation. To practice journalism, the journalist requires a lot of knowledge. One of them is a good knowledge of press law. And beyond a good knowledge of press law, an ideal journalist is required to be well grounded in nearly all areas of knowledge. He's told at the journalism school that he is and should be a specialist generalist. This means that he should learn and know a lot about all other fields while specializing in journalism. As it is his duty, in conjunction with his channel or medium, to inform, educate, and entertain society and keep it running. He cannot afford to be Henley's human insects. Robert A. Henley, the science fiction author, recommended ideal wide-ranging competencies for every human being. What every human being should be able to do. About 15 or 20 of them. And concluded that specialization is for insects. So that essentially is the nature of journalism practice. Journalist is therefore given the most liberal education. In addition to all the journalistic skills of news writing and reporting, interviewing, editing, graphics and design, digitization, marketing, networking, public communication, etc., he also receives a good dose of the knowledge of sociology, psychology, history, literature, ethics, politics, economics, literary criticism, research and investigation, leadership, human, material, financial, and time management, etc. Before leaving the School of Journalism, an ideal journalist is expected to have been imbued with a good nose for news in terms of skills, high reportorial ability, critical thinking, an analytical mind, a sense of sound judgment, a good investigative ability, a good research ability, leadership, marketing and time management abilities, resourcefulness, doggedness, a missionary zeal, and above all, a high level of courage. With all this knowledge and skill, he becomes well equipped to practice in any of the genres of journalism. A typology of journalists. One of my teachers and professors has tried to give us a typology of journalists. He divided journalists into 4 groups. One is cocktail or bread and butter journalists. These are journalists whose only preoccupation is economic or financial gain. Second category, journalism of the next of kin. These are journalists, so-called professionals, who will hide, neglect, or turn around the truth in order not to hurt their relatives, bosses, proprietors, government, etc., irrespective of the enormity or gravity of their misdeeds and the negative consequences to society. Third type, journalism of the general order. These are journalists or journalism who practice unquestioning or subservient journalism. And the fourth is conscientious journalists. These are journalists or journalism that ideally abide by the ethics of the profession, upholding truth and societal interest courageously all the time without minding whose ox is God. Of course, when we talk about journalism and journalists in this paper, we are talking of the fourth category: fertilizer and combustible. Generally, fertilizer is a chemical or natural substance added to the soil or land to increase its fertility. It's a natural or chemical substance that is spread on the land or given to plants to make plants grow well. A combustible is a substance that catches fire and burns easily. Fertilizer and combustible are metaphorically used or adopted in this lecture to imply factors that influence, increase, intensify, actuate, and fire productivity or fertility in a certain direction. In effect, the central thesis of this lecture is that journalism is a fertilizer and combustible for human rights activism. Before looking into how this is so, let us consider human rights activism. Human rights activism generally refers to engagements in social or political campaigns to promote the understanding of and respect for human rights and actions against the violation of human rights. Any person who engages in social or political action against any potential or actual violation of human rights is a human rights activist. Of course, when the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on 10th December 1948, these rights are spelled out, 30 of them. Right to equality, freedom from discrimination, right to life, liberty, personal security, down to right to a social order that articulates that particular document, and community duties essential to free and full development, freedom from state or personal interference in all those listed rights. The United Nations also charged every individual and every organ of society to strive by teaching and education to promote respect for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and by progressive measures secure their universal and effective observance. Inherent in that charge is the unverbalized implication that all human beings ought of necessity to be human rights activists. They are obliged to take action to protect any of the human rights when it is in danger or being violated, or after it has been violated, to seek redress. Because the human rights are for all human beings. So all human beings should logically be voluntary protectors and defenders of human rights. But as the reality of the human situation has revealed, this is hardly the case. On account of greed for power, position, money, many human beings infringe on the rights and freedom of others. Also, on account of ignorance, fear, lack of means, and other factors, many human beings succumb to the suppression of their rights as well as the rights of others. How journalism fertilizes and fires human rights activism. I'm privileged to have received a very liberal education right from childhood. I grew up in a fairly large polygamous family, notwithstanding my Yoruba culture, which out of unquenchable respect for elders, then dictated that children remain mute when elders were conversing or communing. Even if the elders are towing a wrong path, the young ones in my family were relatively allowed to hear their views. These views were also always respected. The right of freedom of expression was ingrained in the family. My family, and especially my letterless but highly literate parents, when we mean to say people are illiterate, we say they are uneducated. They are not educated. They are not uneducated. We say they are uneducated. Lack of education is lack of civilization, lack of culture. So anyone who is civilized, who is cultured, is educated. He may be illiterate. My letterless but highly educated parents of blessed memory upheld logical reasoning, justice, fairness, egalitarianism, objectivity, open-mindedness, and respect for their rights and the rights of others in all their dealings and actions. My mother especially, an exceedingly intelligent, hardworking, methodical, contented, loving, caring, and superlatively motivating woman, abhors cheating and injustice to no end. She will always stand up for her rights as well as defend the rights of others in whatever legal and peaceful way she could, including reporting and handing over ethical and legal offenders to law enforcement agents, the police in particular. Needless to say, my parents' precepts and more importantly practical and living examples rubbed off greatly on me. The Bible teaches us to train up our child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will never depart from it. Proverbs 22:6. I discovered that like my parents and in line with their training of me, right from my youth, anywhere I go or find myself, whatever I do, I will detest cheating, injustice, and unfairness. I will not cheat others, and I will not tolerate being cheated. Moreover, I will defend the right of others to the best of my ability. I can recount very many examples of this, but 2 examples shall suffice. The first one, during my secondary education, between 1973 and 1978, I had a very close, brilliant, and beloved friend who had a medical condition. He was living with his aunt, perhaps because of the medical condition and the cost of his upkeep and education. The aunt and her husband were perpetually hostile to and maltreating him. He would come to school sad and dejected almost on a daily basis and recount his serious ordeal to me at our private moments. But I thought here in school, I could no longer calmly absorb the unending tales of unfairness and injustice. To put an end to the unjust situation, I relayed it to my mother and sought her consent to allow my friend to live with me. She consented to my request, and we ended the malodorous nonsense. That was a practical example of human rights activism. The second one, in 1983, my University of Lagos Bachelor's Degree Mass Communication coursemate and quintessential friend, Babatunde Johnson Isamoko, with whom I was taking picture at the Lagoon front, and I were posted to the then Ogun State Polytechnic, now the Moshood Abiola Polytechnic Abeokuta, for National Youth Service. We were retained. About a year on the job, I stumbled on my friend's monthly pay slip and found that he was placed on grade level 8 as an assistant lecturer, while I was given grade level 9 as a lecturer grade 3. Yet, we both possess a bachelor's mass communication degree each. I immediately called his attention to his unjust treatment and followed it up with a report to our dear former teacher and then head of our department, the now late Dr. Adefemi Shonaike of blessed memory. He also promptly called the attention of the Polytechnic management to the irregularity. At the end of the day, my post was converted to assistant lectureship and salary to grade level 8 with the unapologetic excuse that my previous level 9 offer was an error. At the time, and up until tomorrow, I never felt that anything untowardly happened to me. On the contrary, I felt greatly relieved and happy that justice has been served. For injustice, as Aristotle teaches us, arises when equals are treated unequally and unequals treated equally. Injustice arises when equals are treated unequally and equals treated unequally. So this is another evidence of human rights activism. Such a liberal, just, fair, and egalitarian disposition is what journalism education ingrains in every ideal journalist and will be journalist. At the journalism school, the budding journalist is educated at like the press. He is the eye, the ear, the nose of the people. It is impressed on him that it is one's duty as a gentleman of the press to expose all the ills and evils in the society and fight social, political, cultural, and other injustices. He is told that it is his onus to bring up issues in society towards their resolution. It is his duty to alert the society of upcoming dangers and contribute speedily to averting them. It is his duty to uphold and promote public responsibility and accountability of individuals, groups, and governments. All these and many more are inextricably linked with human rights and human rights activism. For a journalism trainee from an already rich, liberal, just, fair, and egalitarian background, therefore, journalism becomes a fertilizer and combustible for human rights activism. How did this impact or play out in my case? I move on to my contributions to scholarship and human rights activism. The Vice Chancellor, sir, the hallmarks of an academic is research, teaching, and community service. I've elected to present my contribution to knowledge and human rights activism together because most of my scholarly researches and publications that have made the greatest impact have been concerned with the how of the ideal exercise and protection of the rights of freedom of opinion, information, expression, and the press, guaranteed in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 9 of the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, and Section 39 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. These three laws guarantee the right to freedom of expression and the press. Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, universally. Article 9 of the African Charter, complementingly in Africa. And Section 39 of the 1999 Nigerian Constitution, essentially in Nigeria. Before I elected to be trained in journalism and mass communication, I had what I thought was a very good idea. Hello? Sorry. Just a minute. Please come. So before I elected to be trained in journalism and mass communication, I had what I thought was a good idea of freedom of expression. What will it be other than just have the freedom to say your mind at any point in time? But by the time I got into journalism school, I discovered that it is very much more than that. So freedom of expression does not mean free thought and speech alone. It means freedom of conscience, of thought, of speech, of verbalization, and of all communicative or expressive acts, including movement, assembly, association, religion, and protest. Once any of these components is abridged, freedom of expression or communication is gagged. So, well prepared by my good liberal education, fired up by my great journalistic knowledge, enamored by the huge knowledge and wonderful competence of my undergraduate and postgraduate press law lecturer, and eventually my MSc dissertation supervisor, the late Dr. Adelumola Ogunade of blessed memory, and encouraged by the United Nations charge, I developed a great interest and stupendous passion for press law, a course I've now taught for 41 years, from 1983 to date, and especially for freedom of expression and freedom of the press, teaching, researching, explicating, and publishing on their meanings, essence, impact, processes, activation, protection, and defense under both democratic and civilian dispensations and during military rule. So massive were the interest and passion that about 1/3 of my 52 publications, which included 7 scholarly books, are on these fundamental and core human rights. Moreover, although I've researched into and published on at least 21 other areas of journalism and mass communication in national and international scholarly outlets, comparatively, some of these publications have not been as impactful in reception as my researches and publications on freedom of expression and freedom of the press. In the following passages, I presented the 4 categories of publications. The first one, starting with dismantling the culture of silence. The work is a triad: a journalism and mass communication title, a human rights work, and an intellectually powerful book of general reading. That was my first published scholarly contribution of huge impact. While deploring the negative, oppressive, and harmful attitudes and action of individuals, groups, and governments who and which suppress freedom of expression, the book educates humanity on the primary importance, fundamentality, and inevitability of communication to man and freedom to communication. It establishes the absolute necessity for both press and press freedom in the modern world. It prescribes 17 compulsory prerequisites for humanity's attainment of a freely communicating press and society, to the effect that a majority of men will not only fully understand the fundamental freedom of communication, they will also be ready, fortified, and equipped to defend it at all times. When the manuscript of that book, when the manuscript of the book was ready in 1988, I sent it to all the major and popular publishers in Nigeria. All of them returned the book with a comment, the manuscript with a comment that the content is very good, but their publishing interest was not along that line at that time. That was 1988. The book was talking about allowing freedom of expression everywhere in the world. And 2 years earlier, Delegiwa was murdered by a letter bomb believed to have been served in by the Ibrahim Babangida government. So all of them were afraid to publish any work on freedom of expression. So when they returned the work, I became disillusioned. There was nothing I could do. But as fate will have it, one of my elderly students, Biodun Bello, walked into my office and saw the manuscript on my table and picked it. When he read the manuscript, he said, "This work should not die." What were we to do? He said he knew a typist working at the Federal Ministry of Education and Federal Ministry of Information then, who was very good and was running the work, and we will produce it that way and give it a cardboard cover. And that was what we did. And we produced 100 copies of the work and sold it at production cost, 15 naira. About a month after, one of the female students just walked into my office and said he met a man who collected her copy and that the man wanted to see me. And that person is Sir Jare Oyeshola. So I went to meet the man. He congratulated me very well and said we should jointly publish it. If I could get 2,000 naira, he will also add 2,000 naira to produce 1,000 copies. And that was what we did. At that time, at the time the work was about to come out, I was about rounding off my master's program at UNILAG. So I looked for people as a weapon. Robert Serumaga said, to fight without weapon is sheer false heroism. If this book is released and I'm picked up, what will happen? So I looked for people. I took the rolled copies and went to visit all these people. Ebenezer Babatope, Femi Falana, very many of them. Ganifa Wehimi, Wole Soyinka, and wherever I went and did not meet them, I just dropped the renewed copy. By the time I will come back, all of them will start congratulating me. The forward to the book, of course, was written by Femi Falana. At the end of the day, he volunteered to write the forward. He was working with the late Alawa Kabashorun, former MBA chairman. Before I got back, Mr. Alawa Kabasonu had written a complimentary remark to be published with the book, to be put on the back cover. And then, of course, Taiwo Larin was the first person to get to the venue of the launching. Professor Wole Soyinka not only congratulated me, he volunteered to pay for the NSC Secretariat at Lagos, our hall, where the book was launched. And he also chaired the launching. As of that time, Falana, Wole Soyinka, and Dr. Taiwo Larin were not seen eye to eye. All of them sat together on the same table. And it did not escape Sunday Magazine, which said it was like a reincarnation of the Bosch National Conference, and also commented that only God knew how Oloyede was able to make it, bringing three enemies to sit side by side on the same table. They all came to celebrate dismantling the culture of silence. Of course, the late Chief Gani Faweyemi gave me a copy of his work at that time, The Mother of Delegiwa, and he also attended the launching by proxy. Amnesty International Nigeria sent me a letter of appreciation, in which it sincerely thanked me for involvement in good things which Amnesty International stands for. The first civilian governor of Lagos State, Alhaji Lateef Dakonde, sent me a generous check immediately after the launching of the book. And beyond this, by 1993, when he was contesting the presidency of Nigeria under the SDP, he sent me a letter asking me to be his press and private secretary, just because of reading my work. I was with him for a month at that time before Babangida disbanded NRC and SDP. That was the first book in summary. And then the second one, publications in the Constitutional Rights Journal. I looked for human rights journals and I contributed 4 articles, all documented in this presentation. By the time I wrote the third one, even under military regime, looking at the press, military, and freedom of expression under Abacha regime, the journal itself, the editorial committee of the journal wrote me a letter requesting me to be on the list of their permanent contributors. I'm told time is fast spent, so I'm trying to summarize. The third one, after those 4 articles, I now decided to review all the articles on freedom of expression and the press, good as they are, published in academic journals. They suffer restricted circulation. So I brought them together, 6 of such publications published in different journals, improve upon them, review them, and publish them. Of course, before it went into publishing, I gave it to my communication law lecturer to review, 2 people to review. His commendatory forward to the book, Press Freedom in Nigeria, a critical analysis of salient issues. My communication law lecturer at University of Lagos, the late Dr. Ernest Adelumola Ogwade of blessed memory, greatly appreciated the frankness, the candor, and the keen insight with which the author, that is Oloyede, presents his views. He comments concerning the book that every thinking Nigerian who is really interested in the nation's democratic welfare, anchored on a free press, ought to read this important and challenging book. Of course, the acting dean of law, University of Ibadan, Barrister J.D. Ojo, who later co-supervised my doctoral thesis, also submitted on the work. There is no doubt that OLOYEDE has done a lot of research on this topic to justify it as a good book worthy of publication. The fourth category of publication happened to be the press under military rule in Nigeria, 1966 to 1993, and historical and legal narrative. A 179-page hardcover work, which I consider to be my greatest international scholarly contribution to journalism and human rights activism. It investigates the relationship between Nigerian military governments and the Nigerian press in the context of press freedom over a period of 23 years. The largely historical legal study focuses on 4 objectives, which are to examine the laws which define the limits of press freedom during military rule in Nigeria, draw together in one document the pertinent Nigerian case law in the area of press freedom during military rule, identify and analyze the institutional, legal, and non-legal measures and mechanisms utilized by Nigerian military regimes in controlling the press, and identify and analyze the socio-political factors that influence or affected press freedom during military rule. The work found out that in spite of the firm promises to duly respect the freedom of the press made at inception by 4 of the 5 Nigerian military governments, all the governments enacted repressive press laws and general legislations which seriously hamper the freedom of the Nigerian press. A preponderant majority of these laws were at variance with the established liberal or libertarian principles of press freedom, which constitutionally enjoin the press to monitor governance. There are about 7 findings. In accord with Sabat's Proposition 2, which postulates that the area of freedom contracts and the enforcement of restraint increases as the stresses on the stability of the government and the structure of society increase, the studied military governments repress the press more during crisis periods than at peaceful time. The last, thank you. The last, of course, being that despite the human laws and other harsh control measures of the military era, the Nigerian press was undaunted and performed very well. The Epimelian Press, which published this material, is an international scholarly publisher. For any material to be published by it, it requires 3 scholars in the country of origin of the work to first of all review it and write their review. So these 3 reviews are sent to the publisher, and they now send it to their own reviewer. And it's based on what their reviewer says that they will follow. When their reviewer sent their review to the publisher, a review I was not supposed to see, they were so thrilled to allow me to see. They sent a copy to me. In that review, the reviewer made a few declarations that I intend to quickly present. The author provides a masterpiece interpretation and analysis of the interplay of political power, sociological cross-currents, and human interactions in a dynamic country which has a prolific and viral press. 2, the author has meticulously delineated the area of coverage and has done a fine job of analysis and synthesis. The contents of the chapters are relevant to the titles. By reading this work, one can sense that the author has done a worthy amount of research. Moreover, he has taken the pains to make his declarations and argument lucid and persuasive. As a student of Nigerian government press relations over the years, I feel privileged to read the authoritative interpretation of military post for anyone who intends to study or understand Nigerian history, law, culture, economics, government, and communications. I recommend it as a necessary addition to the chairs of students and researchers of Nigerian affairs. The book enjoyed wide review all over the world. In addition, it won 2 awards. One from the Department of History, Nasarawa State University, because I use a historical legal research method. The current dean of the Faculty of Arts under that faculty is Professor Olayemi Akeomi, current Vice Chancellor, University of Lokoja. I was invited by the department and hosted for 4 days during its second international conference on indigenous knowledge. And I was given a plaque. I was offered job even without interview to join their faculty and the Department of Communication. The Moshood Abiola Polytechnic Alumni Association also invited me, honored me with an award for what they said was putting the Moshood Abiola Polytechnic on the world map. My teaching, pedagogy, and community service. Summarily, I have 42 years experience only as a teacher and academic from 1982 to date. I've contributed to teaching in 2 secondary schools, English and literature, and I have contributed to knowledge in 7 universities. Even while I was at the Moshood Abiola Polytechnic with a PhD in mass communication, I was lecturing in universities. The universities are listed here because of time. Redeemer's University, Ajayi Crowther University, Elizade University, Afiabayola University, Ajayi Crowther University, Lee City University, and Olabisi Onabanjo University. Of course, I've contributed to curriculum development in Redeemer's University and Christian University. And I'm one of the 10 journalism and mass communication experts nationally appointed by the National Universities Commission to put together the communication and media studies curriculum of the recently introduced core curriculum and minimum academic standards for the Nigerian university system. My community service, that will also have to be summarily presented, divided into 4. Well, before external, before moving into the mainstream community service, I must highlight my service to my immediate community. That's the Redeemer's University. In addition to my teaching, research, and publishing responsibilities in the last 16 years, I provided leadership for my department for 7 years. I think the chairman has presented all that, so we can move on. In addition to other special and impromptu duties, I've served in over 50 statutory and ad hoc faculty, university, and university senate committees. And I've not just only served my university in the outlined capacities, I have diligently, meritoriously done so with numerous accolades. I've received from my university, the Redeemer's University, at least 12 letters of appreciation, immense appreciation, appreciation for enormous contribution, commendation, congratulations, special recognitions. The letters are displayed, or some of them, and special awards from the university, not less than 12. I can never forget the superlative complimentary remark of one of my former personable and thorough deans, Professor Olumakinde Odugbemi, about me. After I creditably presented the report of an assignment he gave to a committee comprised of heads of department under him, of which he made me the chairman, at a meeting of the committee with him, Professor Odugbemi looked at all of us in the eyes and publicly declared, yes, Oloyede is a staff, you can give an assignment and go to sleep. I have his permission to quote him in this lecture. Service to the Nigerian university system. That will just be summarily done too. I've served as external examiner. I've served the Nigerian university system in several ways, but first as external examiner, external assessor. And in this regard, I've served 40 universities across the length and breadth of Nigeria as external examiner, assessor. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I hardly serve any university once. Once I serve once, they will keep coming. And it started with the first one given to me, even as an associate professor by Babcock University. The current Vice Chancellor, Professor Tayo, was the dean of the postgraduate school at that time. Before we finished the assignment, he had a letter ready for me. That is the letter. Thanking me profusely for the professional and excellent manner in which I've done the assignment given to me. And that has been the pattern for all the 40 universities. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, there is no external examination I've attended that the authorities of the university will not thank me, and the students will not say, I learned a lot from you by the grace of God. The other leg of it is my contribution to the National Universities Commission, the agency for the regulation of higher, especially university education in Nigeria. Beyond being a resource person to the NUC on journalism, communication, mass communication, and media studies curriculum, development and review, I've assisted the agency in the resource verification of bachelor's, master's, communication programs, both accreditation and resource verification in 29 universities. The preparation for this lecture denied me of 2 additional. I was called twice during this, but I could not leave this presentation. As a consultant to the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization on Media and Information Literacy, I assisted UNESCO on establishing the imperative of media and information literacy policy for Nigeria and in developing a framework for it. I'm also a member of the Governing Council of the Global Science Education Foundation. Joined the council in 2005, 3 years after in 2008, the foundation specially appreciated me for services rendered to the foundation. Of course, I participated in human rights activities severally, joining so many human rights organizations. The Civil Liberties Organization, the Amnesty International, Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, Campaign for Democracy. In fact, we used to go for meetings at Dr. Beko Ransom Kuti's house in Lagos, nocturnal meetings in those days, during the struggle for military rule, during the struggle for democracy under military rule. What were we doing? We were trying to defend people's rights. Okay. Some of us are unsung heroes of the June 12th struggle. We have the recommendations here, just 2, that each and every human being should exercise maximally his freedom of expression and then defend it for himself and defend it for others. Freedom of expression and freedom of the press. The same with the government. So, conclusion. This inaugural lecture is a tribute to individuals whose rights to free expression and free press have at one time or the other been repressed or violated. The daily givers of this world. It's an acknowledgement to those who have been harassed, molested, and illegally detained. It is also an eye-opener and an engagement to every global citizen to maximally exercise and defend all fundamental human rights, and especially the foremost rights of free expression and free press. Acknowledgements. To start with, I'm exceedingly grateful to the Almighty God for being with me and my family over the years and for making this inaugural lecture a reality at His own time.